Years later, he told me his engagement wasn't even his choice. I loved him, but his plan for our future felt like a life I couldn't live. When I saw his vision for our life together, I knew I had to walk away.
Welcome to Ready Tales, a new video, a new story, and we're excited to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.
Today, we're getting into a really quite compelling personal story. It's a young woman looking back on a past relationship. And what really grabs you is how it sort of peels back the layers on unspoken expectations, you know?
Yeah, the things we don't always talk about. Personal dreams, relationship dynamics.
Exactly. The stuff that can make or break things. So you get this real sense of how different visions for life can, well, clash.
Right.
Our mission here is pretty straightforward. Get under the skin of this story, figure out where things really diverged, and hopefully pull out some insights that are actually useful for, navigating our own choices.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how subtle background stuff, our assumptions, really shape these connections. You've got two people here clearly drawn to each other.
Yeah.
But they're working off completely different blueprints for what life together looks like.
Okay, let's dive in at the start then. So our narrator, she goes off to the UK for uni, and pretty soon after, she meets Vic. He's a classmate, a year older, helps her out with studies.
Okay.
She's quite clear. He was interested romantically first, but she genuinely grew to like him, his personality.
What specifically did she like?
She mentions his kindness, sense of humor, his gentleness, fundamental good qualities.
That makes sense. That kind of character attraction is often how things start, isn't it?
Definitely.
But she does drop this really crucial hint quite early on, almost like a quiet thought.
What's that?
That love by itself isn't always the whole picture for marriage.
Right. That caveat.
Yeah, and that early awareness, it kind of foreshadows the whole core issue, doesn't it? It makes you think, okay, what differences was she already sensing back then?
Exactly. Because, as things move along, we start to see Vic's background, his plans, much more clearly. So we find out he's from a pretty humble background, small village life.
Right, near their city, but different.
And he'd work incredibly hard, university, good job afterwards. But his main focus wasn't like buying himself stuff.
No, it was family investment.
Yeah, putting money into the family home, building a whole second floor for his brother who was getting married.
And that speaks volumes, doesn't it? That strong sense of family duty. It's deeply ingrained in many cultures.
It is.
His pride in providing, you can almost feel it. But it's interesting how something so admirable can become, well, a source of friction later.
When it bumps up against different expectations, yeah.
Exactly. Different ideas of what marriage actually involves day to day for both people.
Precisely. Because that second floor, well, it wasn't just for his brother and his wife.
It was for them, too.
This was his plan, where he saw himself and the narrator living after they got married.
Okay.
And he apparently assured her his mother would be, an easygoing mother-in-law.
Which anyone who's been in a serious relationship knows that dynamic can be complicated sometimes.
Right. But actually, she clarifies it wasn't really about his specific mom.
Not the personality as such.
No, it was the whole lifestyle that came with that plan. And this is where their backgrounds really start to diverge significantly.
Okay, so the contrast becomes key here.
Big time. Because she paints this incredibly vivid picture of the daily routine Vic expected.
Go on.
Like waking up at 6 a.m., straight into household chores.
Shared chores.
Yeah, shared with his brother's wife, his mother, his sister-in-law. Everything from collecting eggs to the endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, keeping the house running, and basically zero me time until late evening.
Okay, yeah. You can immediately see the potential conflict there compared to her background.
Vitally different. Middle-class city kid, parents were doctors, just a completely different rhythm of life.
So this very demanding communal lifestyle, that would have been a massive adjustment.
Huge.
You can almost feel her sort of quietly thinking, I'm not sure about this future. It really shows how those life rhythms set up since childhood really shape what we expect from relationships.
It's a fundamental clash, isn't it, about just daily life?
Absolutely.
So naturally, when she finishes her degree and has plans for post-grad studies back in the UK, she sees this as the logical time to end things.
Makes sense.
Her reasoning is the difficulty of long distance, wanting to be upfront, not drag out something that felt, well, not right for her.
Seems pretty rational. considerate even.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid more hurt down the line.
You'd think. But Vic's reaction, it kind of shows a difference maybe in how they process things or what the relationship meant to him.
How did he react?
Not well. Instead of just accepting it, he apparently started spreading rumors.
Oh, really? Among friends?
Yeah, mutual friends, painting himself as the victim, totally heartbroken.
That's tough. That kind of reaction, sometimes it's a coping mechanism for rejection, right?
Yeah.
But it obviously hurts the other person.
Definitely. But she actually mentions feeling a strange sense of relief about it later.
How so?
Because it meant when she eventually came back home, she didn't have to do all the explaining herself. People already had his version, so she could just avoid it.
Interesting side effect. So fast forward a few years,
Yeah, she's back home for a family thing, her cousin's baby celebration.
and guess who's there?
Yep. Vic. And her first thought is just, nope, gonna ignore him, given everything that happened.
Understandable. But it doesn't stay that way.
Not quite, because then there's this incident with Vic's best friend who's had a bit too much to drink.
Oh, dear.
And this friend starts going off loudly about shallow girls.
Oh, directed at her.
Seems like it. Girls who reject, traditional roles. And then he starts praising Vic's new fiance,
Oh, Vic's engaged now.
apparently. And the friend is raving about how this fiance just loves Vic's mom and can't wait to serve her.
Wow. Talk about awkward. And validating all her original concerns in the worst way.
Totally. And Vic. Apparently he looked mortified, just completely embarrassed by the whole thing.
I bet. That's a really stark moment, isn't it? All the unspoken stuff just bursting out.
Right. So after that public awkwardness, Vic reaches out,
To apologize.
wants to apologize, wants to meet up, and her reason for agreeing is quite specific.
Oh, that's it.
She wanted to understand if he'd always felt that way, if those traditional views were always there under the surface. She needed clarity.
That makes sense. Seeking understanding after all that. So they meet.
They do, and initially he denies saying bad things about her after the breakup.
Oh, despite the rumors.
Yeah, but she confronts him with specifics, things people told her he'd said, and then silence. He couldn't deny it.
Cut out.
But then things take a turn. He makes this pretty big admission.
What's that?
He admits his engagement wasn't actually his choice.
Not his choice. Whose then?
His mother's, apparently.
Yeah.
And he confesses he doesn't feel the same way about his fiancée as he did about the narrator.
Whoa. That's quite a revelation. It raises questions about his own agency, the pressures he's under.
It really does. It completely changes the dynamic of that conversation. And then he pivots.
How so?
He starts accusing her of being the reason for his current unhappiness.
Blaming her for his engagement situation.
Essentially, he says her facial expressions back when they were dating made him feel small because he wanted this traditional life.
Wow. So her not wanting his plan made him feel judged.
That's the implication. He felt she acted like she was better than him.
And that's where you see his insecurity. Maybe some wounded pride coming through.
Definitely. He actually asks her, and why shouldn't you smile? What are we beneath you?
Oof. That really highlights a power dynamic he might have expected, right? And a total misread of her motives. It wasn't about superiority, it was about wanting a different life for herself.
And her response is incredibly direct. She just lays it out. You didn't offer me a life to discuss. You gave me a plan and expected me to smile.
Boom. That just cuts right to the core of it, doesn't it?
Perfectly. His assumption that his plan was the default. No discussion needed.
Leaving no room for her own aspirations.
None. And she also calls him out on the damage he did to her reputation with the rumors.
Does he acknowledge that?
He admits he did it intentionally.
Wow. Okay. That shows a certain lack of maturity and respect for her choices.
Yeah. And his final parting shot is basically, you made me feel like I was nothing to you.
Which reflects his hurt, for sure, but it also kind of avoids taking responsibility for his own actions and feelings, doesn't it?
It feels that way, and this is where her family's view provides some important backup.
Her family supported her decision.
Very much so. Her father, apparently, had felt early on that Vuk was just fundamentally different, maybe not the right fit, potentially a source of unhappiness for her.
So his intuition was right.
Seems like it. And after the breakup, her dad was apparently very blunt about Vic's behavior, calling it out for what it was, which must have been validating for her.
Absolutely. Having that family support when you make a tough call like that.
And the narrator herself reflects that actually ending it was the best part.
A sense of relief, of dodging a bullet, perhaps.
Exactly. A realization that she made the right choice for herself. So she ends that final conversation with Vic pretty decisively.
How so?
Basically wishes him well with his fiancée, but firmly says, "Don't contact me again," setting a clear boundary.
Good for her, drawing a line.
And there's this final little detail. Apparently, even after that, Vic was still fixated on the fact that she didn't seem upset about his engagement.
Still struggling to accept that she had moved on and was okay with her own choices.
Seems like it. Still couldn't quite grasp her right to a different future, maybe.
Okay, so we've really unpacked quite a bit here,
Yeah.
taking this deep dive into their story. What are the big takeaways for you, for the listener?
Well, I think first off, it just paints such a clear picture of how tricky relationships can be when you have these diverging cultural expectations or just different dreams for your life.
Yeah, what looks like a loving plan from one side.
Can feel totally restrictive from the other. It really hammers home how crucial it is to actually understand each other's core values and what you both expect day to day.
And secondly, it screams communication, doesn't it? Open, honest communication.
Definitely.
And needing a shared vision, not just one person's plan. Those unspoken assumptions, like we saw here, they just fester.
They really do. It's a reminder you've got to talk about the big stuff, the fundamental stuff, proactively.
We also saw the fallout from, well, handling rejection poorly.
Yeah, Vuk's reaction after the breakup, the rumors.
Right. It shows how hurt feelings, if they're not processed well, can lead to really damaging behavior, stuff with real consequences.
True. But maybe the most powerful theme here is about personal agency.
Absolutely. The courage to choose your own life.
Yeah, choosing a path that actually aligns with your values, your desires, even if it goes against what someone else expects, or even what seems easier.
It was obviously tough for her, but that decision ultimately led her towards a future that felt right for her.
Exactly. And finally, you can't discount the role of family support.
No, having people who get it, who validate your choices, when you're making those big, difficult calls about relationships in your future, that can make a huge difference.
It really can.
So maybe the thought to leave everyone with is, think about those unspoken expectations, the assumptions floating around in your own relationships, romantic or otherwise.
Not just the big life goals, but the everyday stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Are you consciously bringing those things out into the open? Because really talking about those implicit bits, routines, roles, goals, that might be the key to finding paths that are genuinely fulfilling and compatible.
Whether those paths end up being together
Or if they lead in different directions. Both can be valid, right?
Right.
But getting there honestly seems crucial.
And that's a wrap for today's story. We'll catch you next week with a fresh new story. Oh, and we'd really love to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts below, and here's a beautiful video, highly recommended for you. See you soon.